Hey guys, welcome to Quinian's Budget Crafts. I'm really excited about this next module. It has some really cool rooms. Let's start with the statue room. First thing to do is take a piece of EPS, roughly 8 by 8, and then put a grid on it. The grid won't be seen or used in-game, it's just to help you transfer the map to the EPS. Do one block at a time. This line kind of goes up this line like this, and then cuts across here, and so on. You know how to trace. So for the statue, I got these angels here from an awesome person in the community. Thanks, Frodo. Just use whatever you see fit. The Thingiverse link to the 3D printer file is in the description below. Now he had a couple of print failures, but I said to go ahead and send them anyway. I'll use them. Just another example of how it's not a mess up. It'll be fine. Just use it in a different way. So just put your statue of choice down to make sure it's going to fit. If not, modify the room so that everything does fit. And then cut out where you traced. You don't have to use a hot wire on this, but the curves are a whole lot easier and safer than using a knife. A knife will work, but make sure to keep your edges 90 degrees. This room is supposed to be a cave, so you need some walls. Figure out how high you want it to be at the tallest and cut a strip of ready board to that size. For me, that ended up being about 4.5 inches. This wraps around the outside of the floor piece, and the way I cut the board, a single strip wasn't going to be enough, so I cut 2 of them. Now in order to get the ready board to flex around the EPS, you'll need to mash it up a bit. You can use a texture roller or a rolling pin, whatever, just break up the fibers a little bit. Now using a low temp glue gun, bond your 2 pieces if you had 2 or more, and then start gluing it on. If you put the EPS flat on the mat and start your glue up that way, it helps to make sure that the ready board is flush with the bottom of the EPS. After that, you can lift it up and start to force it into place. A good rule here is to only go to the next big curve at a time. Get it to bond to one spot first and then move on to the next curve. I had a little excess hanging off the end there, so I just sort of crudely trimmed it off to get it out of the way. So 4.5 inches is kind of in the way for playability, so you're going to need to trim that down. I figured a 1-inch wall height at the start of the room was good, and I wanted rock above the half statues as if the last people here hadn't finished carving them. Drop the statues in, fight off the fur beast, and then make some marks the lowest you think the wall can go. Then just trace along the wall where you want to cut it off. You can see the Sharpie through the foam board if you're using a light brighter than the sun like I do. But if you can't, just turn it sideways and follow the line from the inside. Just be sure to use a brand new blade here because a dull one will actually shred the ready board and you want a clean cut. Put the statues back in and see if you want to trim anything else. Once you're all happy with that, take all that EPS you cut off from earlier outside, spray the inside of the wall with Super 77, stick on EPS where you want the cave wall, spray more Super 77 on the EPS chunks, stick more chunks on top of those as needed until you get something like this. Just retrim the top if your chunks got out of hand. Put the statues back in and trim where needed to make them fit right. It's mostly just a lot of trial and error. Once you have everything sitting nice, use the edge of the blade to scrape all the EPS chunks down into a solid rock face that you like. I wanted a somewhat smoother erosion type rock, so I took down any sharp edges and sort of rounded it all off. Don't worry about the holes between the EPS chunks, we'll sort that out in a minute. Clean everything up with a shop vac and make sure you're getting all those little nooks and crannies so you can see if it's sculpted the way you want or not. So the DAP drywall compound that I like to use doesn't do well out of these squeezy tubes. So I just cut the end off and squeezed it out that way. Kind of looks like those old push pops. Mix in some nutmeg and a lighter tan color along with Mod Podge to help stiffen the compound when it dries and mix it really well. It's a bit of a task to get it all mixed in. Then just slather up the whole thing. Alternately, you could just put it in the gaps if you prefer the texture of the EPS. When you get to the edges where the EPS joins the ready board, make sure to tie that into the ready board so you don't have any odd jarring lines. Gloves aren't mandatory here, I just hate getting this stuff under my fingernails. So you can use a wet brush and a wet texture roller to get the texture you want. It's totally up to you, whatever kind you like. I went with this sort of spiky thing. The compound will settle out a little bit as it dries, so it's not going to be quite this spiky when it's dry. Now to base coat those angels. You can do it with brown paint like this, but it's a whole lot easier to just hit them with some gray primer and a little bit of tan. So this here is a little USB powered desk fan. They're like $5 at Walmart. If you force the compound to dry faster by putting a fan on it, it will crack, which is exactly what I want here. Or you can let it dry naturally for a smoother finish. I mixed a little alcohol with my paint here to thin it out. Now, this will turn your paint into a weird snot-like mess, but it also helps it to go on streaky and patchy and dry very fast. It all depends on what application, I guess. Just give the statues a good coat of that. That's going to serve as dirt that's settled into all those little details. Now, a series of dry brushings. Put a lighter tan over all the high spots. But don't worry about hitting all of them, just kind of here and there. Then an even lighter tan on the high spots, again, just here and there. Finally, an almost sand color. Get basically all the paint off the brush. And use this one to get in some of the larger recesses. Now use pewter gray to get some of the deeper spots like that open part in the sleeve. Then take granite gray, which is just a little brighter, and dry brush basically everything. I actually didn't dry brush enough here and end up having to do more later, so feel free to do as much gray as you like. A lot of the tan you put on earlier will actually still show through, so it is still worth doing all the tan. You're going to want to do the same paint job to the room too. When you do the nutmeg, just make sure to make it kind of blotchy and cover up any white foam that's left. Put the center statue in and carve out where the water will be flowing. It doesn't need to be super deep, just enough to give a little bit of depth. On this one, the stream is supposed to be from a spring in a cave, so I figured a less than perfect line would be good. If you're going to do a tiled floor or sci-fi or something like that, you'll want to put down a ruler and cut it out cleanly. Double check the fit of the statues. If they're all good to go, then go ahead and put a little hot glue on the bottom and wedge them in place. So this here might be unique to my situation, but I needed those half statues to look like they're part of the overhead rock. So mix up a little bit more of that compound paint and glue, and then paste it in with a stick, molding it just slightly over the edge of the statue. I added a little bit around the bottom and the back of the main one's wing, just for some extra unfinishedness, or dirt piles, that kind of thing. Set it up with the fan and let it dry while we work on some bowls. So previously I had to use DAS clay, and that would work really well here too, but I wanted to show you another product that you might prefer to use. This is Crayola Model Magic. It kind of feels like bread dough, hardens well enough on its own, and weighs a whole lot less than DAS. It may also be more available locally for you too. So just squish out a little blob and mold it over something like this bead. Carefully cut where you want the edge of the bowl to be and peel the clay off the bead. It'll spread out a little bit, so just nudge it back into place. I decided I wanted these other two bowls to be a little less refined, so I left them kind of misshapen and lumpy. I'm going to be putting epoxy in these, and that stuff gets real hot and has a little bit of weight to it, so to reinforce them, I coat first the underside in Mod Podge and use that to glue them to the angel's hands, and then coat the inside of the bowl. The middle one's bowl needs to have a spout-like shape, so just pull on it a bit with the brush while you're painting on the Mod Podge and it'll form to the little spout. Now get some pewter gray mixed with Mod Podge and do the whole inside of the stream trench. Any bit that you color outside the line is fine, it just adds a cleaner rock separate from the surrounding dirt. Do a little dry brush of the cave with it, a few spots on the floor here and there, and then coat the bowls. I kind of like the marble look I got, but looking closer it seemed kind of out of place, so I did a second coat of gray on the bowls to make them more uniform. So this is a clear gel tacky glue, the clear version of the stuff I used on the cabins. I've never used it before, but I had problems with the supposed clear drying tacky glue drying white, so I figured I'd give it a go. It does in fact go on and dry clear, but it's a little shiny, so keep that in mind if any will be exposed. Just put some down and paint it flat where you want some of the play sand and dollar store sand mix put down. This also has fish tank rocks in it, but I ended up not using any of them here. It's just my standard generic dirt mix that I keep around. I put a little bit in the bowls to make it look like they'd been there for a while. Then some around the statues, along the edges, a little pile by the stream, just make it kind of random. And then dump the excess back into your container. The statues are blending in too much, so take a little of that black, brown, and green wash, and then paint everything that's not the statues or the ground. It doesn't need to be 100% coverage, but close. Just don't brush it or you'll reactivate the paint and compound. Just blot it on and let it run. Again, a suggestion from the community was to put a little bit along the edges to kind of give you a bit of shadow. Thanks for that tip, Aggro. So once that's done, put a little piece of painter's tape over the end to block off where the epoxy is going to go. So this is the 5-minute kind, which is a lie. You get closer to 3 minutes. I put a drop of blue food coloring on my palette over there, and then picked up just a drop of the drop to mix into the full tube of this stuff. Put a bit in each bowl, making sure to have it drip from the main one. Fill up the trench. And use a toothpick to put a little dot on the angel's face so it looks like her tears are filling the bowl. Kinda depressing, I guess. Blame the module. Looks cool, though. So this stuff gets real hot, real fast, so work quick. What was left over in the cup turned green and then yellow, but the small amount here stayed blue-green, so your results may vary. If you use proper mixing cups and pigments, you won't have any issues, but doing it on the cheap like this seems to work fine for me. This is Reindeer Moss from the dollar store. Just pick off itty-bitty bits of it. Use some tweezers and hold it up in various spots to see if that's where you like it. If you do, go ahead and paint on a little bit of that clear tacky glue and stick the moss to it. I wanted a little hanging from the bowl, somewhere the water collects, like around the stream and around the base of the statues. And the top of this area looked a little boring, so I put some up there hanging over the edge into the area below. Okay, and this is what I had mentioned earlier. They still blend in too much for me. So an itty bitty piece of sponge with some tweezers. Get some granite gray on it and blot down basically everything on the statues to make them brighter. There we go, that's better. Now you can see them. And same as every other project, go ahead and paint the outsides with Mod Podge and black paint mix to seal it all up. Well, there you go, guys. Hopefully this helps you to incorporate some statues into your builds. Next, we'll continue with this module and do some steampunk sewers. Thanks for watching, everyone. I'll catch you on the next one.